we will have this available by podcast and also YouTube video. But the privilege of being together live tonight is really meaningful. We get to ask questions and have a dialogue. So I'm going to start how we've been starting these sessions. I want to welcome everyone to Let's Talk Interfaith Voices on Israel. My name is Alyssa Thomas Newborn, and I am the Rabbanit of Congregation Netivot Shalom in Teaneck, New Jersey. I'm a board-certified chaplain at a local New York City hospital, and I'm the president of Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains. And it's my privilege tonight to have our third session in this four-part series of Let's Talk Interfaith Voices on Israel. I want to express gratitude to our wonderful speaker tonight, Dr. Jeffrey Chadwick, to our listeners and to our co-sponsoring organizations, Netivot Shalom, Moishe House based in, the International Rabbinic Fellowship, and Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains. So as many of you know, in this series, we have the privilege of hearing diverse faith leaders across America discuss their personal and religious connections to Israel. And each of these sessions features a positive interfaith bridge builder, which we know right now we deeply are yearning for more than ever. The sessions, of course, are virtual so that we can reach people across the country and even across countries. And each session is recorded, so it's going to be accessible on Neshama Cast, which is our Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains podcast. You can find Neshama Cast wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts. So this series began in response to division, distrust, and isolation that the Jewish community has felt since October 7th, and the loss of interfaith relationships among friends and colleagues, as well as, of course, the shocking rise of anti-Semitism. As a reminder, the purpose of this series is not to discuss specifics of the Israel-Hamas war, but rather to share positive stories and connections across faith communities. So we're hearing directly from a person face to face, or if you're listening, hearing the voice, accessing truth and our shared humanity. And through these sessions, we're striving to build positive connections around Israel through our diverse faith relationships with the Holy Land. So we're going to get a window into Dr. Jeffrey Chadwick's heart as a person and his community that he lives in and works in, an opinion and a perspective that we may not already be hearing, which is really important. I'm so grateful and proud to say that all four of our speakers over the course of this series are people that I deeply respect and have had the privilege of working with and cherish their friendship and leadership. So without further ado, I'm going to get us started with tonight's discussion. We have the privilege, as I mentioned, of hearing Jeff's personal and religious relationship with Israel. And of course, he's been a person who's a friend of the Jewish people and of Israel for a long time. I'm going to read his full bio, which is both very impressive, but also I think gives you a direct lens into who he is and where he places his values, and also the kind of leader that he is. Dr. Jeffrey R. Chadwick serves as BYU, Brigham Young University, as the Jerusalem Center Professor of Archaeology and Near Eastern Studies, and also as the Religious Education Professor of Church History and Jewish Studies in the Department of Church History and Doctrine. At BYU and within the CES, his religious education teaching emphases include the Bible, Old and New Testament, the Book of Mormon, church history and Christian history, Judaism and Islam, so he knows everything. He is also the host of the annual BYU Passover Seder each spring, one of the largest model Seder programs in the US. Jeff was born and raised in Utah, and he graduated from am I saying it right? Lomond?
Ben Lomond High School.
Okay, Ben Lomond High School.
Everybody's a Scot in that area.
He served a 2-year LDS mission in West Berlin, West Germany, in the mid-1970s. He and his wonderful wife, Kim, are the parents of 6 adult children and a dozen grandchildren. Dr. Chadwick earned a BA from Weber State University with a major in political science, a minor in German and political and police science.
Yeah.
He earned a MA degree from Brigham Young University in 1984 in international an area of studies focusing on Middle Eastern politics and ancient Near Eastern studies, historical geography. He did graduate work in Israel at Tel Aviv University and at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem while completing his PhD at the University of Utah Middle East Center of Archaeology and Anthropology, specializing in the archaeology of the land of Israel, with a minor in Hebrew, Egyptian, and Aramaic languages. He taught for the church educational system for 20 years in the LDS seminaries and in the Institutes of Religion at Weber State and Utah State University. He has been affiliated with the BYU Jerusalem Center as a faculty member for 40 years, since 1982, before the current center was built. Joined by his wife, Kim, he taught ancient scripture and Near Eastern study courses in 23 different student programs at the BYU Jerusalem Center between 1982 and 2015, traveling widely with his Jerusalem Center students in field study all over Israel, Jordan, Egypt, and Turkey. And his plan is to teach at the Jerusalem Center for the 2024-2025 season as soon as the Gaza war situation permits. Dr. Chadwick has also researched, surveyed, and excavated at several historical and biblical sites in Israel, including Jerusalem and Hebron in the 1980s, 1990s, and at Gat of the Philistines, Tel Asafi Gat since 2001 for the last 20 years. He's currently senior field archaeologist with the Tel Asafi Gat Archaeological Project in Israel with Aaron Mayer of Bar-Ilan University, the project director, where he directs excavations in Area F in the upper city and in Area D in the lower city in the ancient Philistine capital city. He's also the director of the American Expedition to Hebron publication project and associate member of the original AEH excavation staff. He has served as a member of the board of trustees of the American Schools of Oriental Research, ASOR, and is a senior fellow at the W.F. Albright Institute of Archaeological Research in Jerusalem. He's the author of 3 books, editor of a 4th, and has published more than 70 academic articles, chapters, and studies. So I want to pause and just think personally. I mean, obviously, as you can hear, Jeff is brilliant, erudite, has taught and been devoted to Israel for many, many, many years. Probably knows more than many Jews about the land of Israel, and is a scholar, and he's a mensch. I personally got to be his student when I was at the Tel Asafi Gat archaeological dig with Aaron Mayer as well. I got to excavate in Area F for 2 summers, and really anyone who has had the opportunity to learn from him in that context knows that he's a modern day Indiana Jones. He has a hat, he had the whip, he had it all. But he's a funny and kind and extremely genuine person who, certainly since October 7th, has publicly been extremely supportive of the Jewish people and of Israel, but really throughout his career has been someone who puts Israel at the center of his religious, spiritual, and professional work. So we are delighted to spend time with you this evening. I know for you it's like 3 a.m. and the fact that it worked out with the dates because things changed, the fact that you're calling from Israel also is so special. So we want to start by asking you a little bit more about your background, your work, your faith community, just to get to know you, not just from my words and reading your bio, but just to hear a little bit more about you and how things are in Israel right now for you, what you're doing.
Well, thank you for allowing me to be with you all this evening. Right, it's just gonna start to be morning here pretty quick in Jerusalem. We write those bios because academia demands that you inflate your value, and that is just something that has to happen at that particular way of making a living. But I just prefer that people call me Jeff, and I like to think of myself as a teacher and also as a friend of the Jewish people, of everyone basically, but particularly of the Jewish people, which has been a community and also a topic, if you will, of great interest in my heart, literally all my life. So thank you for letting me be with you and just express a few feelings tonight. I became involved with Jewish people when I was about 8 years old. Now, I'm a Mormon. We've kind of undergone in in my religious community a rebranding effort in the last 4 or 5 years, where we're trying to emphasize the name of the church rather than this nickname that my folks got 100, 200 years ago. And everybody knows this if you're American, that there's this group of Christians called Mormons, and that they go back to Joseph Smith and New York and the whole story and the Book of Mormon and the plates and everything. But they got the nickname Mormon because of that, because of this volume of scripture that we use in addition to the Bible. But people want to emphasize now, especially in our leadership, that we have these Christian values. And so the full name of the church now is something they kind of ask media to pronounce: the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so I'll usually now, instead of saying a Mormon, which is still the way we do it in Israel because it makes sense, I refer to myself as a Latter-day Saint. And I've been that all my life. But literally, because you're baptized when you're 8 years old, if you grow up in a Latter-day Saint family, and I was. Literally that same year that I entered the 3rd grade, I made friends with a boy that moved into our neighborhood who was Jewish. And now that I think about it, it's really maybe a little counterintuitive that his name was Gregory, since that's a very, kind of the name of one of the popes, right? But his name was Gregory. And we became friends, and he had to go to Hebrew school every week, one of the afternoon. I think it was a Wednesday, as I recall. And he was I didn't even know what Jewish people were. When you're 8, what do you know? Especially in Utah, right? Because there were like 12 at that time. And his father was connected to a big Air Force base that exists there. And so we were friends, and he asked me if I wanted to go to Hebrew school with him because he didn't have anybody else to. So I said, yes, I'd like to. Why not? So I actually went to Hebrew school with Gregory for probably 7 or 8 weeks there during the session that he was in. I had no clue what was going on. I just went because he was a friend. But that was my introduction to the Jewish people, and that you have an entirely different way of approaching faith and scripture and everything than I grew up with. And it was fascinating to me ever since then. It was a few years later that the 6-Day War of 1967 occurred. And so there I was like, 12, I think, well, going on 12. And all of a sudden on the news broadcasts, which were always in black and white TV, there was this story of this country called Israel. I'd only heard about Israel in Sunday school, kind of a colored map of the Holy Land on the wall. So this was a surprise to me that there's a place called Israel, and it was a modern country, and they won a war in 6 days. This really struck me because I thought, in the 1960s, World War II was still very big, and there were lots of programs on about World War II, everything from combat and 12 o'clock high to McHale's Navy. And it took years to win World War II. Well, here's a country that wins a war in 6 days. This just captured me. So as I was going through junior high and high school, I started reading about Israel. And then when I was a senior in high school, the Olympics in Munich occurred. And I have to say that this traumatized me in a way that I can't explain. I'm the only kid at Ben Lomond High School. There were no Jews in my high school, not one. I'm the only kid in my high school that was glued to the transistor radio on this story that was happening with Munich and the loss of the Olympic athletes. And the next year after that, the first year I entered college, was the Yom Kippur War. And again, for some reason, I feel just a magnetism to the state of Israel, who is now fighting an existential battle. And I'm I'm learning names for the first time, like Golda Meir and Ariel Sharon and all of the people that were involved with that. By the way, I just watched the movie Golda on the plane coming over to Israel. I flew on El Al, which is the only people flying here. So, and I enjoyed that, except that in the movie, I thought, if you didn't really know about the Yom Kippur War, you'd have a hard time following this movie. Because it's just, it's Golda walking down hallways. I mean, okay, well, I'm glad I know what happened. And so from that time, when I started college, I decided I want to know about this country. So I was in political science and made my issue to learn about Israel. Became the Model United Nations representative for Israel when I was in college. And then I served an LDS mission for 2 years in Germany. And that's where I began to meet Jewish people again, was in Germany, because there just, like I say, weren't lots in Utah. And I'd come across them all the time. And it's a very unusual thing, because you're sent as a Latter-day Saint, as a Mormon boy on a mission, to go and say, hey, why don't you join us? But the interesting thing that I felt when I was working with Jewish people there is that they were really not interested in becoming Mormons, okay? And I sensed this right away. And what I found happening was more an exchange of values and religious ideas. And I found that I was actually more the student than, the young wannabe teacher of people in those situations. I bought my first Hebrew Bible in Berlin, right? And decided I'm going to learn to do this thing. And when I got back to Utah in 1977, I looked up the congregation there, Brit Shalem, and started with their Hebrew school, with their teacher, this woman whose name was Charlotte Levy, of blessed memory, and she began to teach me Hebrew, not only biblical Hebrew, but spoken Hebrew. She kind of limped along in spoken Hebrew. And it was delightful. It was my first experience, and they said to me, Jeffrey's a nice Jewish name, but we're going to have to give you a biblical name, so choose one if you'd like it. And I said, well, I always liked the story of Joseph. So she said, okay, now you're Yosef. So I still carry that name that Charlotte insisted I have. And she did a funny thing with me. She said, the reason we have these classes is for people to become bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah. And it was an older group of people that were still working toward that. And they were like 4 or 5 Jewish people, because by then we had some in Ogden, Utah. But she said, well, you're not going to have a bar mitzvah, but we're going to have an honorary one for you anyway. And so I'm happy to say that I got good enough to be able to do a faux bar mitzvah with her. And this is at age 22. So just a decade too late. And I got married, and we had a wonderful family. And I entered into this work pathway of teaching Latter-day Saints, basically in religious studies sessions, first starting with high school students and then with university students. And when you become an educator, the idea is, well, you have to move on and get other degrees. So you pass through the lanes and you do what you know how education works. It's both wonderful and as corrupt as it can be. So I decided I'm going to do work that will enhance my understanding of what I already, for some reason, love, the people of Israel. So I started to do the historical geography, and then eventually went into the archaeology of the background of the Bible. And in that, begin with the people of Israel from their very beginnings, all the way till today, working on both kind of the historical and the material culture, but also in the Jewish studies track. And I didn't conceive, maybe around 1980, when I was 25 and started this, that it would be a lifelong learning enterprise, and one that would bring me, I think, and I should be careful here, but I think of maybe the 100 people in the world that are my closest friends, more of them are Jewish than Latter-day Saint. I'm not sure that
Wow.
we should make those kind of balances, but it's just worked out that way. And so I'm so grateful to kind of be an adopted cousin, you know, if you will, of this society that are so many of my very closest friends. I just had dinner last night with a dozen Israelis who have been on the senior staff here of our archaeological excavation for 25 years, and we go all the way back to the 1990s. So we met at a wonderful restaurant downtown in Jerusalem. It was a kosher meat restaurant, Italian meat restaurant. That's interesting in Jerusalem. And we laughed and cackled and told stories going back a quarter of a century of how we're all together. And I thought at that moment, knowing that I was going to speak to this group tonight, how is it that I was lucky enough to get in on this, especially being because there's no realistic way that I'm Jewish, but I'm accepted by this group of people. And I thought, what a peculiar blessing. So from my point of view out, whether it was with teaching, you know, what Christians call the Old Testament, which I now exclusively call Hebrew Bible, or whether it was teaching Christianity in a way which led people to appreciate and understand its Jewish birth, okay? Or whether it's helping other Latter-day Saints to understand who the Jewish people are and what the covenant of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob is, and what it means in terms of not only living a life of sanctification with a covenant, but also the obligation of being a light to the world and giving a light to the world, which is the heritage that you give the world with the Bible, but also of just being a people in this vibrant world who have contributed in a light year kind of a way in terms of the number of Jews to the number of other people in the world, but the contributions of the Jewish people have really lifted the world in ways that it wouldn't have been otherwise. That from all those perspectives, from ancient to modern, because I studied Talmud when I came to Israel. I went to the Opan here and I decided, well, I'm going to study Talmud. I have a funny story about that at the Hebrew University. That I'm going to share that now with Latter-day Saints and with anybody else who will listen. And so I've kind of viewed my career over well over 40 years now as being both a Latter-day Saint educator, but also an ambassador of goodwill, trying to connect not only Latter-day Saints, but anybody who was interested with the Jewish people and the values that we all inherit from you. Okay? And I'm not at all shy to say that we who are not Jews are in debt to the people of the covenant. It's just how I work. But I wouldn't have believed in my first trip to Israel in 1982 that I'd still be coming and still be doing this and still, you know, approaching the age of 70, have the opportunity to interact with people like yourself. I just really appreciate that you would even, you know, listen to someone like me, because mostly I'm talking to non-Jewish people and I'm saying, we need to straighten out the story here. You need to know who the people of Israel is and why the people of Israel are connected to the land of Israel, and why that is the most anciently, historically legitimate connection that exists on this big planet. So yeah, that was a long introduction, but thanks for listening. And I'm still, of course, regularly in contact with people that I've worked with for 40 years. At Brigham Young University, by the way, we have a very robust program of interfaith relations. And so I count among my friends Jewish people and leaders across the spectrum, right? Ultra is not a good word. Orthodox Jews, even Jews that we would consider maybe already Jews in the United States, conservative, liberal, Reconstructionist, everyone from I'm more or less connected to Yeshiva University, and am a friend of Rabbi Soloveitchik, who some of you will know on that side. But out in Utah, we have everybody from the Zippel family, Rabbi Efremi and Zippel of the Chabad in Utah. They're doing a wonderful job with the small but growing Jewish community there, to Rabbi Sam Spector of our congregation, Kol Ami, the biggest one in Salt Lake area. But also then going all the way to the West Coast, Rabbi Mark Diamond comes to BYU regularly. So from all over the country, Jews come to BYU by invitation to share their values. And these are values that we have, as we say, across the spectrum from Orthodox to Reform. And we're very grateful for those friendships that we have. And you mentioned the model Pesach that we do, the model Seder that we do every spring. We never do it on Pesach, okay? We always plan it. So we have 2 or 3 sessions, usually in March, April. And they'll go 3.5 hours, okay? It's kind of like the real thing. By the time we're done, it's midnight somewhere in New Jersey. And the thing is that Latter-day Saints, especially living in Utah, have almost zero possibility of ever getting invited to Pesach, right? With a Jewish family or participating in any other way. But they have an intense interest because Passover reaches out and affects other people. It's a vibrant component of the Christian story. But usually when Christians think of Passover, they're thinking of like a Last Supper experience. And it's a lot more complicated than that. And so what we started doing years ago was to do a model Seder for big audiences, right? And to take basically selections from the Haggadah and to do it the right way, to really eat, matzah and maror, and to go through the story and to explain it as we go. This is how Jewish people do Passover. This is not, your Last Supper, with all due respect. And people love it. People come back year after year. We've had Jewish people come from Utah, just come to see what it is, and they go away thinking, that was pretty cool, that somebody is interested in teaching about, a major aspect of religious identity and faith. So we were covered in the Times of Israel for that a few years ago, which was very nice. They did a nice write-up on it. So like I say, my life has been trying to represent and build those bridges between the Jewish community everywhere, not just in Utah, but everywhere, and the Latter-day Saints. There are about 17 million Latter-day Saints, so we're kind of, in terms of numbers, we know what it's like to be a small minority in the world. And from my perspective, the better educated and more outreaching that we are, the better off for everybody. So that's what I do, and that's why I'm in Israel all the time as well, because not only is it my privilege to teach Brigham Young University students in Utah about these things, and I teach 4 sections of Jewish studies every semester. We'll teach 240 students, 60 is the class size. That's what we can fit in our rooms. And they're always full with a waiting list every semester. So what's that? Nearly 500 students a year. A basic course in survey of Judaism from the beginning, right, to modern times. And but I'm also working with Latter-day Saint students here in Israel to show them the land, and from all the perspectives of the history, the archaeology, the geography, everything that goes into the Bible that would help them relate to the reason that this is a covenant land, and the land that the Lord our God loveth and keepeth his eye upon from the beginning of the year even to the end. And our program here has processed thousands of students who go home from Jerusalem with a love for the country, with a love for the Jewish people, and a love for the people that the Jewish people here are also striving to love. And sometimes with success and sometimes with great difficulty. But yeah, I'm to the point now where the term Holy Land is not necessarily a tag that I want to assign to this country, because Holy Land is a great thing to call Israel if you understand why it's holy and why it's important. But some people use the term Holy Land to avoid calling it Israel. And so I tell my students that I stopped visiting the Holy Land decades ago. I now am privileged to work in Israel. And I want them to understand the relationship of what the modern state of Israel is and how the people of Israel is connected to it in not a renewed way, but the continued way that it has been for the last, 70, what are we going on now? 77 years, something. I can't remember exactly what's coming up here. But yeah, so that's what I do. I'd be happy to take questions.
Jeff, I think just hearing you speak, I'm emotional. I'm sure other people are feeling this way too. Your students and everyone who meets you are so blessed to learn from you, and especially the Jewish people are so blessed that you're a shaliach. You are a person who is really combating hatred and misinformation and teaching with love and wisdom and a deep knowledge of the land and our people. And to call you a ally is doesn't feel like it's enough. I mean, everything that you said has been, I'm sure I'm speaking for everyone else listening, really touches the heart and the spirit. And I'm wondering, I want to ask a question that sort of blends two pieces that I know others are wondering. And I also want to invite people in the chat to feel free to add things for those who are with us live. I want to ask, especially for those who maybe don't know as much about the LDS faith and practices, what the connection to Israel is, in addition to sort of the history of as you mentioned, the Christian connection. And if there's anything specific we should know about the LDS community to get a better sense, and also to help us build more bridges with the LDS community. And in addition to that, I'm wondering, especially from BYU, we talked a little before about how college campuses are so wrought right now with anti-Semitism. When you and I spoke earlier, I'm wondering what the feeling is at BYU, and how, sort of, for the Jewish people who maybe aren't as familiar with the LDS community, if you can give us a sense of maybe what that community looks like, and what the response is to anti-Semitism. And it also is very clear that you're someone who's a person who's probably the first address to teach around that.
Well, it's interesting. Let me start with BYU first. It's a great privilege to work for Brigham Young University, and I'm not doing anything that I do behind anyone's back there. They are 100% invested in the courses that I teach, and from the president of the university, who has come to our model Seder, and down to the dean and the department chairs that I work in, everyone is absolutely in favor of it. Now, we want to be friends with everyone, and we believe that interfaith connections are valuable with everyone. And one of the things that I did, because I've lived in the Middle East so long, I've lived in Israel for 10 years altogether, and that's enough time to get to know a lot of people, because I have a lot of friends here that are Muslim as well. And so I thought, you know, one of the things in terms of having a credible experience is, can you speak about other people the way that you speak about Jewish people? And so I felt like I could, especially because the experience of being in Jerusalem. Jerusalem's the only place you can go where you've got, if you will, an educational laboratory where you can look robustly at Islam and Judaism. It's a fascinating place. So I also have aspects of Islam that I teach in other courses, but Judaism is the backbone of what I do for BYU, and everybody knows that, and they're very supportive of it. We don't have lots of Jewish students at BYU, and this is the reason is obvious is why, right? We're a religious university, one of the largest private universities with a religious background in the world, and one of the reasons to go to BYU is to become steeped in Latter-day Saint value. Jewish people have their values; they know who they are. We don't have what they feel they need, and I recognize that. So it's especially important at a place where you don't have lots of Jews. Not that they're not welcome, but it's just not a place that they're drawn to. But to go ahead and then have educational opportunities where you can learn correctly and in an appreciative way about Jews and Jewish culture. We have more Muslim students because the conservative nature of our society means usually that that Muslim parents, often from abroad, feel safer sending their kids there than, say, to a more secular university in America. And what I can say is that I have a lot of students. Everybody takes my classes that is Middle East connected. If you get to BYU, you wind up in my classes because you have a survey of this. And I have a class that I teach, which is crafted as a bridge class. It's called the Survey of Judaism and Islam. And it's a 2-hour course, and one of the block hours is this coverage of Judaism, and the other block is Islam. Well, everybody who comes from an Islamic background winds up in my class, and they take the class saying, "Well, I want to see what you teach about Islam," and at the end they say, "Thank you for treating us so well." But what they tell me often at the end is, I also took this class because I want to learn about Jews and Judaism, and there's no place I can. There's no place I can get it. But if I take this class, I have cover to learn about Jews and Judaism. So I think we're doing a small duty even there. But it's been difficult, of course, since October. But one of the things about BYU is that we don't allow unkindness to exist on our campus. So it was very clear that you're free to say what you think, but you have to say it respectfully, and we will not have demonstrations that are disruptive. And we haven't. And I will say that while even at BYU, because it's a community of over 40,000 people, you get people coming at the current situation from all different directions. We speak respectfully and with an attempt to have empathy for what anyone is suffering, for whatever reasons it has come to be visited upon them. But I will say that at BYU, the overwhelming sympathy has been for the tremendous blow that not only Israel but Jews the world over have absorbed and are still absorbing because of October 7th. Now, in our neighboring university to the north, where I took my doctorate from, the University of Utah, this is a public institution. And so they work under different rules than we do at a private institution. Because private institutions can say, these are the rules, if you don't like them, walk, right? But in a public institution, it's a little bit different. But I'm very happy to say that my alma mater, the University of Utah, simply said, we're not going to have threatening and disruptive activities on our campus. Okay, you're free to say what you think, and you're free to say it as vehemently as you want. But the minute you step in the way of someone else trying to get to the library, you're done. And I'm very happy to say that the Utah community has responded in a way that I wish other communities would have. Yeah, there's been some small demonstration actions at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, and also at the state capitol. But I will say that they understood they had to behave themselves, and they did. So Utah hasn't been, on the radar for this terrible, this ugly manifestation that we've seen in the United States in the last, well, since November, basically. I'm happy to say that, and I hope that maybe that attitude could. And I'm sure not happy with what I see happening from California to the East Coast right now. It breaks my heart. I will tell you that that's not happening in Jerusalem. Jerusalem right now is calm. I am right now in East Jerusalem. I'm on what is known as Salah ad-Din Street. Okay, this is the main street of Eastern Jerusalem, and I walk down the street, and I have this tag on, and it's outside my shirt, and I walk down the street, and people say to me, "Ahlan," and I go into the store to buy some Coca-Cola, and the Palestinian guy there just is normal. I wish that in America, in New York, it felt like it does here in Jerusalem, even in Eastern Jerusalem, because people here have a calm resolve that this has to be finished. But there's not the rioting, there's not the craziness, there's not the incredible ignorance about what has happened in Jerusalem that there is in New York or New Jersey or in Washington, D.C., in Los Angeles, in San Francisco. That there's not the tremendous ignorance that you've seen of people shouting from the river to the sea and not knowing what river and what sea and what they were doing. As I'm looking at this, and not only, I'm returning to America next week, by the way, because I've been here a month and I did my thing, so now I have to go back to others. We're hoping to return with our student program in September. That is now the plan. If things will settle down, we'll be back, and I'll be back with them. And that'll be, I'll turn 70 here if we can successfully get back. And that's a goal of mine, to turn 70 in Israel, because I turned 26 in Israel. And we want to see if we can get that close to the same mark. But so we're resolved to return as soon as we possibly can. But in the meantime, what I wish is that we could get the United States of America. Europe would be nice, but the United States of America, particularly, to understand that they're being sold a basket of lies. And they're being sold a basket of lies not only by demonstrators who are basically ignorant of the facts, but by people who have co-opted that. They've co-opted people's natural concern for Palestinians who were impacted by war, okay? And they've turned it into a very ugly manifestation of the unrest that's been going on in America for a decade or more, okay? There's this narrative right now emerging that, it's a lie that outside agitators are co-opting this to use for their own purposes. But everybody who sees it knows they are. everybody who sees these tent cities pop up overnight knows that this is taking a thing and is making it something more sinister and co-opting anti-Semitism that we thought had been wiped out, like polio, okay, like some of the disease. We thought a year ago that this was covered and we were inoculated against it in America. And now we see that we're not. We've been infected with it again. And we're going to have to go through an entire generation now of correcting this horrible disease again. It's like the fight against polio again. And it's just as deadly and just as horrible. And so I'm telling people very openly that what's happening in America is one of the darkest periods in our history, and that we have got to do better. And we've got to educate better. And that's why I say our educational institutions have failed us. They failed us with a corruption of the concept of free speech. The concept of free speech and free interchange is a wonderful thing, but when you corrupt it, you can do tremendous damage, and that's what's happening right now. And so I'm not silent about this. I hope I would not be silent about this if this was anti-Muslim. I hope that I would be not silent about this if this was anti-Buddhist, okay? But I'm absolutely not going to be silent about this because it's anti-Jewish. And the Jewish people and their narrative have become a part of my life that is, it's not that just as an important part of my life, it is part of the tapestry of what I am. And I'm not going to let this happen. So yeah, that's what we're doing at BYU and in the Utah community. And I think we're a little better at it maybe than some other places, but you don't want to brag because you don't know what's around the next corner, and you just keep working.
Thank you for modeling that for your students, and it's true for us to know and really internalize that the LDS community is a community that's our friends and that's our partners, and that we share so many values, true, deep religious justice related respect, holiness values. And I love how you've truly committed your life's work to embodying those values and building those bridges. And that's a very courageous and brave thing to do. And I just want to speak on behalf of everyone here that I think that, you know, especially as Yom HaShoah was this past week, and we think about Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut coming up, you know, having those friendships with people like yourself who are able to be leaders in that way. I mean, it's the greatest blessing. It's Orla Goyim in every direction. And I just want to publicly thank you for that. I know we have about 5 or 6 minutes left. If there's anyone who wants to ask a question in the chat, feel free. Otherwise, I'll ask a final question, but I just want to make sure to give people a chance if you want to put something in the chat. I'll just give one moment and see if anyone wants to add anything. And if someone does, I'll blend it in. But I want to end by asking a question that I think honestly you've already answered in a variety of ways, but that I've asked each time as we've closed. And that is, you know, as I mentioned at the beginning, this conversation is coming in the midst of darkness and loss and pain. And we're having the conversation to bring positivity and connection. And so I just want to ask and open up if there's anything else that you want us to know from your community, anything else that we can do in terms of bridge building specifically. And I want to call out that someone did put in the chat, and right now it says my name, but it's definitely someone else. If someone else wants to, if you want to put your name, because your name is labeled as me right now. But the person said that they're tearing up and would like to know how we can do this as Dahlia Schulman, what we can do to build more bridges too as well.
I would say, because Latter-day Saints Mormons are still quite misunderstood, don't be afraid. No Latter-day Saint wants you to be anything other than what you are. Okay, we don't proselyte in Israel by agreement, and I think most Latter-day Saints are becoming educated enough. You know, Christians we're always trying to say, well, our view of the Christian experience is a little different than yours, and the reason that we're, you know, Methodist or Lutheran or Baptist or Latter-day Saint is because we think we've got a better angle on the story. Would you like to join us? Okay. It's hard for people like that to understand that Jews actually, you know, are not interested in that story, and they've got their own story, and they don't really, you know, need you to invite them to join somebody else's story. I get that. And I try to help people understand that, but Latter-day Saints, I think intuitively, we teach that the Jews are the covenant people of Israel. Latter-day Saints have this idea that in biblical times, a great portion of the people of Israel became lost and assimilated into the cultures of the Middle East, and from there, you know, throughout the world. That's just the way the human genome works. So Latter-day Saints believe that everyone in the world, if they could possibly appreciate what it would mean, would in some way link back to the lost tribes of Israel, and in some way be an inheritor of the values of the covenant of Israel that the Jews keep alive and maintain with memory. Okay? And the Latter-day Saint message is that you ought to consider yourself as also an inheritor of that covenant and the obligation to live the light that it gives the world. Even if you're not Jewish, even if you're not the people of Israel who remember who they are over, you know, 4,000 years since Abraham's time, you have a privilege of being informed by that covenant and by that law, which says you shall love the Lord with all your heart and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And so Latter-day Saints think of themselves as an inheritor of the blessings of Israel through that lost Israel connection. But they look at the Jews as the people who have always maintained that, right? That if the Latter-day Saints appreciate the covenants of Israel because of what we call a restoration, right? We understand that the Jews appreciate that covenant because of recollection, you know. The Jews didn't have to be told this ancient covenant kind of got lost somewhere and has to be renewed in modern times. The Jews have never forgotten who they are. They have never forgotten that covenant and that obligation to be a light to the world, to live the covenant of God, to love God and to love others. And the story of the Jewish people has always been to live that covenant, but also to love others and to give of that covenant to others what others would accept.
And you're right.
And, that is the model
Right, Tim.
that we would like to teach.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And if there's anything, you know, including, I know within Dahlia's question was learning more about LDS, if there's any address you think that would be a good one for us to learn more, maybe it's there's lectures from you on BYU online or something. We welcome that too.
You know, anybody who wants to know about the Mormons can go to the internet and get all of the nice
well,
stuff,
learning it
all
the
of
right
the
way,
evil stuff people say. But
You know?
there's an official church website, churchofjesuschrist.org, that is the official one, and they'll usually be nice in what they say.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again to Dr. Jeffrey Chadwick, to Jeff, to our listeners who are with us live now, to those who will be listening in the future on podcast or on YouTube, to our co-sponsoring organizations, Netivot Shalom, Moishe House Based In, International Rabbinic Fellowship, and the Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains. We're so grateful to you, Jeff. Really, this was I think this was you just provided us with some deep nourishment and pastoral care and kindness and embrace and education. You did it all. You did it all.
This seems
Thank you for
entirely counterintuitive to do this, but let me wish you all shalom Yerushalayim.
It's a real blessing from you. And our next Let's Talk Interfaith Voices on Israel will take place on May 19th, same time and same Zoom information, with Anila Ali, who is a Pakistani American educator, an interfaith leader in America. Anila Ali has been an advocate for education, women's empowerment, and minority rights in America. She's also been very outspoken in support of the Jewish people in Israel.
No, I'm still
and she's written extensively as an advocate of diversity and inclusion, and continues to be a strong voice and representative of American Muslim women. So that will be on May 19th. Thank you again to Jeff. You are such a blessing to all of us, and I'm sure many people are probably going to want to reach out to you. So I may share your email if that's okay.
That's fine.
And we appreciate you joining us from Israel, literally in the middle of the night.
Well, we'll fly
Thank
back
you,
east
and
to join you.
maybe you can go back
well.
to sleep.
Yeah.
Laila Tov, thank you so much.
Yeah. Boker Tov.
Boker Tov.
The sun will just be up here pretty quick.